Kia ora, I'm Katy Mandeno from Go With Grace, and we're here this morning to talk about the importance of end-of-life planning. I'm really mindful that this is different for everybody, so part of this talk this morning is me sharing my experiences and my learnings. I know that it will be different for all of you. What you will want will be different, what you will need will be different. But hopefully this gives you a little bit of encouragement and a little bit of insight into the importance of planning ahead. Okay, so just a little bit about Go With Grace. There is a website, gowithgrace.nz, that you've probably been on to book your places here today. The website is the beginning of or the base of a community, and beyond that we've got lots of other things going on, but it's a really foundational piece of what we're doing because we're really all about connecting people to information. This is part of, again, from our learnings. There was a lot of information that I couldn't find when I needed it, so this is my response to that. We are here to support people who are caring for loved ones, people who want to get their affairs in order, people who are planning farewells, and people who are grieving a loved one. So why is planning ahead important? For me, it's about shaping your legacy. So I think we've all heard stories about what happens when somebody dies and things aren't put in place, and people have different ideas and opinions about what should or shouldn't happen after that person's passed. I guess I'm here to say, shape your legacy, take responsibility for every stage in your life, including these final stages. Honour your future generations by giving them the guidance and support they need to help you to do what's right for you when you have passed, and allow your loved ones to grieve. So if when somebody dies, there is so much energy going into what do they want, what would they have wanted, what do they need, who should be here, who makes the decisions. It takes people away from being able to actually be with their loved ones and to grieve. So this is a photo of me and my beautiful children on a mountaintop down in the South Island. I'm doing all of this kaupapa for them, because when I die, I want them to be able to just grieve, just to be with me and to grieve, and to have all of the hard work done for them. Why is this important now? I think we're there's lots of conversations about the pressure on our hospices, the pressure on our health systems. Our whole population is getting older, and what that means is that when we have elderly people turning up into emergency departments and there's no instructions about whether that person wants to be resuscitated or not, as an example, that's adding to the pressure on our systems. We're already under pressure. This is a chance to, all work together to do what's good for our entire communities. That's fine. Welcome, Morena. So my journey began about 20 years ago with the birth of my second daughter, Faith. She was born at 22 and a half weeks. We found out at our 19-week scan that most of the heart was missing. And that was an experience that taught me a lot about what pain feels like, how when you can be surrounded by love, and this kind of grief can still just cut you off at the knees. Over 20 years ago, this journey began for me in the loss of a daughter, because I couldn't find the information I was looking for to be able to properly honour her and grieve her. And I couldn't find the sort of support that I needed to get me through that at the time. So I honour Faith as the beginning of my journey. This handsome fella is my dad. We had an amazing life with Dad, and he was a really stoic Kiwi bloke, so he suffered a lot of pain, and he kept a lot of his aches and pains to himself, as lots of Kiwi blokes do. He was diagnosed with terminal cancer about a week before Christmas, and he died in late January. So we had 3.5 weeks to go from Dad's fine to Dad's gone. And again, just through my experiences with Dad, I learned a lot about what this end of life stage feels like, and also how we could maybe do things better. This is us on the old Land Rover as kids. That was a little glimpse into our childhood. This is my partner, Chris. So Chris died about 4.5 years ago by suicide. We had been together 8 years. He was a beautiful human. He was caring. He was compassionate. He was very, very smart. And I didn't see his death coming. And again, just going through the experience of losing Chris has given me a different kind of lens altogether on what the importance of this work that we're talking about today. So this is the context of why I'm here, and this is why this mahi, this work, is very, very important to me. So one thing I've learnt is that through grief we grow, and if you're lucky enough to not have lost people close to you, then well done. That's not how it is for most of us. For most of us, we have lost people close to us, and in my experience, how we grow through that grief really defines whether that turns into an experience that makes us a bigger, stronger, braver person, or takes from us. And part of this work that I'm talking about here today, part of this planning, is about helping us to be prepared ourselves so that there's less work for the people that we leave behind. This really is a gift for the people that you leave behind. For me, growing through grief has been about finding my purpose and building resilience, really living with compassion, because we really don't know what anyone is carrying around with them on any day, at any moment. Grief is hard. Grief is very hard. It's also made me really redefine time, so our perceptions of time and what time means to us. And I think that's a gift because linear time is a bit boring. So, living with grief and what grief does to time, I think is a gift. So all of this comes down to the gifts that I feel that I've taken from my grief and the lessons I've learnt. So from faith, what I learnt from faith is that lots of us don't know how to be around or talk about death, especially when it's unexpected. And if you're the one grieving, that can be really, really hard. So part of this work is about helping us to understand how we can feel more comfortable in these conversations, to shed some light on these conversations so that we can make that easier for each other. I also learned that every death is very unique. So, when you think about funerals today, a lot of them can feel quite similar. And I think, there's no need for that. We have the opportunity to have that farewell be whatever we want it to be. Our farewells or our funerals should be as unique as we are. So it's about, being encouraged to think about what your very unique farewell could look like. I think we need to trust our gut when it comes to matters of the heart. So with Faith, she was born in hospital because she was so early. And I naturally, instinctively took her home. It wasn't something that they offered at that time. That was my, my choice. I pushed for that. And we had her at home with us for 3 days. And I know that had a significant impact on my healing and my acceptance and my processing. So I would say always with these things, when you're making decisions about what's good for you with your end-of-life planning, trust your gut, trust your heart. I also learned that our legislation doesn't honour grief. So up until 2021, miscarriages and stillbirths were not really considered part of our bereavement legislation. So as of 2021, a mother like me losing a 22-week-old baby is now entitled to 3 days leave. Doesn't feel great, does it? I can tell you now, it took me a lot longer than that to even start to, function as a human, let alone be able to be productive in a work environment. So lessons from Dad. With Dad, we were really lucky. He was under hospice care, and that meant that we got to keep him at home. And after he died, we made the decision as a family to keep him there until his farewell, which was 5 days later. So we were supported by an amazing local funeral director called A Graceful Undertaking to keep Dad at home. And that time with him, being able to care for him and provide his after-death care as a family is one of the most sacred privileges I've ever experienced. It's not for everybody, and not everyone has the support to allow that. But if there is the support, I would so strongly encourage you to consider keeping your people with you. These are your loved ones, and the idea of handing them over to someone else's care when they've died can be really tough. So if it feels right to keep them with you, I would say do that. And we have amazing organisations in the community now who can support that, so you don't have to do it on your own. We also learnt from Dad, we call it death admin. This is what happens when the one person in the relationship, or the 50+ year marriage, has been in charge of all of the paperwork, all of the books, all of the accounts, all of the finances. It gets a bit tricky when everything's in one person's name. The banks have some thoughts on that, and the lawyers have some thoughts on that. So I would say, if for no other reason than planning ahead for when you're no longer here, sorting all of this out now saves so much time and stress and actually money. So, the people worry about the cost of updating a will or getting some, paperwork done at the lawyers. I have learnt that the cost of doing that when you're here is just a tiny proportion of what will be paid by your family when you're not here, if they need to sort that all out. No instructions means lots of extra work for your family. Lessons from Chris. What I learned when Chris died is that you need help, so much help. So if you're the one who has lost somebody, I would say accept all of the help you can. If you're someone who's here because you're thinking whether you should put some effort into planning ahead, do it, because the more work you do, the less work your family has to do when you're no longer here. I also learned that everyone processes shock and grief really differently. So this means that you can't always predict how your family will respond. You can think that you have this beautiful, loving, connected family, but when everyone is in the trauma of grief, people behave differently, and so the more things are written down, the easier it will be on everyone. And like I was saying, just keeping your people at home is a really amazing experience and really helps with some of that deep grieving, or it certainly did for me. Okay, so the importance of planning. I'm just going to touch on these 6 points today. We've grouped them into these areas. You can tackle one of these things at a time. I think they're all really important. So the first one is health, your legal and finance, so making sure that all of your legal documents are in order and all of your financial assets and things are tidy. Your digital profile and data, so by that I'm talking about things like your computer, your iPad, your phone, all of your documents and all of your photos. If you've got social media accounts, what happens to them when people die? So that's what we're going to talk about there. After death care, so this is what happens to your body after you've died. I think this is one area that people can really struggle to think about. But for me, I would say it's one of the most important, because it's an opportunity to really make sure all of your family and your loved ones are on the same page after you've died, and also to potentially give them an opportunity to grieve by doing things like being able to care for you at home. So your farewell, I try and avoid the word funeral, because I think that sort of comes up, has certain connotations to it. And I really like the fact that farewells now are turning into all sorts of things. They are life celebrations and gardens, they are hikois, they are in churches, on marae, they're everywhere. There's no cookie cutter model for what a farewell or a funeral should look like. And I think we've fallen into this a bit of a trap with society where, we feel like there is, there are 2 or 3 options we get to choose from. That's not true at all. You can have it be however you want it to be. And your personal beliefs and wishes. So just acknowledging that there are really significant religious, cultural beliefs that are really key to this whole process. And it's absolutely fascinating looking into different cultures and how some of those, generational practices have come through, and I think there's lots we could learn looking at other cultures. So this is something that we developed just as a bit of a checklist, and this is really just talking about end-of-life essentials. So your will is really, really important. Having enduring power of attorney is really very important, so that there's someone who you trust who has the ability to make decisions on your behalf when you no longer can. Aged care support. A lot of us like to avoid those questions about what happens when I can't live in this home anymore. What happens when, should I downsize now? What does that look like? What does that feel like? If you haven't already, these blue bags up here are from an organisation called ElderNet. And that's kind of their wheelhouse. So I would encourage you to take a bag, and I'll be talking about them a bit later as well. Your Go With Grace plan, I'll talk to you a bit about that later as well, and also your advanced care plan. So this is something that's done through the Ministry of Health, and it's really specific to your health needs as you move into an age and stage where you can't necessarily make decisions on your own anymore, or for yourself. Cool. So why is planning ahead important for health and well-being? Part of this for me is about protecting your rights. So I'm sure that you've all heard stories of people who were cremated when they really wanted to be buried, and they didn't find out until they read the will 3 weeks after the person had died, or somebody who was resuscitated when they had asked not to be. So the more your wishes are known, the more people can support you to honour them. Even things like organ donation. Just because you tick the box on your driver's license doesn't beholden you to that. But if that's something that's important to you, talk about it. Let people know why that's important to you. Having someone who can make decisions for you after you have passed, not after you've passed, but after you're no longer in a position to make decisions for yourself. So this is really common with people who have dementia or Alzheimer's. Enduring power of attorney are really, really important. So this is someone who you trust to make decisions on your behalf when you no longer can. If you don't appoint that person, then it becomes this sort of more open family discussion about what should happen to mum or dad or auntie or... So if you make the step to appoint that person, let everyone know, then it's just really clear where those decisions are being made. It really helps. It helps to stop the discussion. Create an advanced care plan. So I'll share a link with that. Like I said, this is just really important to help people understand how you want to be treated or cared for if you go into hospital suddenly, later on in life. And regular GP checks. So there's a couple of reasons why these are important. One is because if you die, without any apparent cause and you haven't been to the doctor for 10 years, even if it is natural causes, if there's no medical notes or information to support that you had some sort of issue with your heart, or then instead of it being treated as a natural death, it can then potentially go down the track of going through a coronial inquiry, which I can tell you is a lot more stressful for your family than if you are deemed to have died by natural causes. So just having those up-to-date medical records means that they can check in with your GP, they can see that you had a bit of an issue with your heart and it had been ongoing for 3 or 4 years, and they can make the assumption and the decision that you died of natural causes, and it's a lot simpler at that time then for your family. The other really important thing is that you need to prove capacity for, if you've updated your will and you suddenly cut a whole lot of people out of it, there's potentially going to be someone who challenges that because they'll say you were, getting on, or you didn't know what you were doing, or so the point of being able to prove capacity through these visits to your GP is also a way to make sure that no one can challenge or question your decisions if you do something like update your will down the track. Cool. So why is a will important? I had no idea until I started delving into this work that if you get married, if you have a will and then you get married, your will is no longer binding. Yep. And the other thing that happens is that relationships change quite often these days, and people don't understand or appreciate the complexities of the relationship law. So if you are in a new relationship and you've been with that person for a couple of years, they are then considered your other half, and they then have rights when it comes to your assets when you die, if you haven't really stipulated that in your will. So I would encourage everyone to take a visit to their lawyer. Just really look at what's in your will, make sure it's up to date, make sure it's current. If you've had new children, if you've bought new property, all of those things should be included in that document. Insurances are another one. We often take out life or health or funeral insurance, early on, and it's a policy that we don't necessarily go back and look at. So it's just a good chance to go back and look at what those policies are, really understand what your cover is, and make sure that your family know about that. So if you're paying for funeral cover, make sure that someone in the family knows about that, so that can take some of the financial burden off them at that time. Make sure that all of your property is outlined in your will. So there's all of the, you might have a house and you might have some shares, but also think about things like, special taonga, special family, mementos that maybe don't have any financial value, but are really, really precious and important to you. You can outline them in your will as well, just to make sure that they go to the person or the people that you want to have them. The other thing that we found with Dad was that because he was the guy who'd done all of the money stuff, we had to actually really do a lot of work to uncover all of the different bank accounts that he had open, to really dig in. We had to go discovering to find insurance policies and to work out even which accountant he had been using recently. So I think it's, make sure that somebody knows all of these key contacts as far as your legal and financial matters. I think we find now that if families move away or children move away from home, quite often they are disconnected from, who's mum and dad's lawyer, who's mum and dad's accountant, and those become really key people or really key contacts when somebody dies. Again, have the conversations. It's also important to think about debt. So if you have debt, it will be passed on. And it's a lot nicer if people are aware of what that looks like before they find out about it as part of the death admin. Yep. So your digital profile and all of your data. We touched on this earlier. It's a really tricky one. What happens to all my stuff? You think your clothes, they can pop off to hospice, that's fine. But when it comes to some of these really important, files or really personal information, who do you want to have access to or control of your computer and your phone when you're not here? And again, make it easy for people. Make it really easy for someone to be able to know what to do with that. Because also when you are left with somebody's stuff, if you don't know what was special to them and what wasn't, it's really hard to know what to do with it all. With social media accounts, you can set up what they call legacy contacts. So if you have a Facebook page, you can log into your admin area and you can set up a legacy contact, and that means that person then gets access to your account if you die. Yep. So it's a nice way to. I think we've all known people who have died and their birthdays still pop up on our Facebook. And sometimes that's nice and sometimes that's really hard. So. It's good to know there's options there. The other thing to think about is all of those regular subscriptions that we now subscribe to these days, and some of those direct credits. I can tell you we had some real battles with the likes of utilities companies when Dad died. So the amount of proof that we had to give them just to provide evidence that he had died in order for Mum to access the account, because everything was in Dad's name. It's really time consuming and it's really hard work. So if somebody knows what all of those subscriptions are and someone has access to those accounts, that definitely makes life a lot easier. So after death care, this is when we talked about making plans for cremation or burial, and even where your final resting place is. So more and more people are being cremated these days, and I think that's a great thing if that's your choice, but I think it's also really important to let people know what you want to have happen with your ashes. So I think a lot of people get, their loved one gets cremated and then the box arrives and then what? Where do I put them? Where would they have wanted to be? So if you do opt for cremation, make sure you add that extra layer of detail to say where you would like your ashes to end up. I would also encourage people to think about embalming, the pros and cons of embalming. So sometimes we don't have a choice with embalming, but about 85 or 90% of deaths, because they happen really naturally, no embalming is actually required. And there's really amazing support services now to allow you to keep people at home. So with Dad and with Chris, we had them both at home. With Dad, we kept his body nice and cold using bottles of water in the old Coke bottles from the freezer and the ice packs. That was about as good as it got back then. Now there's these really fancy pads that sit under caskets, and they keep our people cold so that we can keep them at home with us, and so they don't need embalming. It's quite a medicalised process. From my perspective, I feel like we're quite conditioned to think it's natural and normal now, but it's quite unnecessary for most people. So again, I would just encourage you to think about whether that's something you actually need. I have strong memories of visiting grannies who passed away when I was quite little, and we would go into the funeral home and they would wheel her out into the viewing room, and she looked funny and she smelt funny, and that's what embalming is for me now. So whereas Dad was Dad and Chris was Chris, and that felt good. Think about who's best to provide that after death care. So our local funeral homes, funeral directors do an amazing job. There's all sorts of options now. So Haven Falls and A Graceful Undertaking, they will both support you to have your people at home or in their care, or a bit of a combination. So don't just feel like the first call that you should make when somebody dies is to a funeral home. You don't, I would say when somebody dies, if you're with them, I would do nothing. I would just be in that moment, just have that time with them. These decisions can come later. So it is really helpful to have the support of a funeral director, but there's lots of different kinds of support these days. So again, do some homework, do some research, ask lots of questions now so that you can feel really good about what's going to happen to you. There are options around donating your body or your organs. I know that Auckland University is always keen to have conversations with people who are interested in donations. So yeah, that's another thing to think about. And also think about how, whether you will be in a casket or, these days if you're opting for a natural burial, you can do really beautiful things like wrap yourself in silk or linen shrouds. So basically it's just a beautiful big long piece of cloth and you don't even need the box. So, you can have really eco-friendly options when it comes to caskets. You can have big fancy ones, or you can opt for something like a shroud and not even have a casket. So lots of options, make it personal to you. And the more you share with people about what you want, the more they can honour your wishes. This is just some of the things to think about for your farewell. So, one thing I'm really, really hot on is that we live really long, rich, busy lives, and sometimes we have really important people from our past that we really want to make sure that they know that we have died. It used to be good because you could just open the Advocate and you'd get the read, and we all just read the column and then we did the crossword, and but it's not like that anymore, is it? People, we sort of rely on things like Facebook to tell us when someone's died. So I would say if you have some really important people who you want to know about your farewell, write a list of their names and numbers so that when you die, someone can let them know. There's nothing worse than finding out someone special to you from 20 or 40 years ago has died and you didn't have the opportunity to farewell them. Music, photos, catering, location, speakers, these are all of the decisions and the things that have to be thought about as part of a farewell. Unless you just scrap all of this and you just say, I'm not having one, or I just want everyone to go and have a picnic at the beach, or, you can do whatever you like. But in a more traditional farewell, these are some of the decisions that have to be made. And I guess my challenge to you is if you don't help to make these decisions, someone else has to. They might not be the ones you want. They might play Billy Joel when you really wanted AC/DC, or and they'll choose a photo of you that you really didn't like. So, we're encouraging people now to even choose the photo to put on the cover of their service sheet. Because why not? You know the ones you love the best. Choose it for them. Then they don't have to do that for you. Lots to think about. Just touching on personal values, so really, really mindful that in this space there is a lot of tikanga that happens in some cultures that's very, very important for people to follow. We all have our own personal beliefs. I know people who will never be cremated because of the cost of cremation on the environment, as an example. It's not something you would normally think about, but if you have someone who's very environmentally minded, the cost on the planet between a cremation and a natural burial is really significant. So something to think about. There's also lots of religious rituals and spiritual practices that need to be considered here. And if you don't, again, let people know what's important to you, they won't necessarily honour you in the way that you would want to be honoured. So let people know, have the conversations. Okay, where to start? How's everyone doing? Are we okay? Have I traumatised you? It's a lot of work, hey? A lot of work. Yeah. The beautiful thing is that if you start to have these conversations now with your family, it's actually something that strengthens those relationships. And it makes that event for them, that farewell, that time for them, just so much gentler and so much softer. It just, yeah. So where to begin? Start some conversations. You don't have to do any fancy plan at this stage. You don't even need to run off and go and see the lawyers straight away. Just start scribbling some things in a notebook. It's just getting into the practice of thinking about these things, of talking about them. It doesn't have to be with your kids. It can be with your buddies, your book club, your walking group, anybody. Just really encourage other people to have these conversations. And then this is really, really important. When you're ready, make sure you share your plan with your people. If you've done all of the work and you've made this beautiful plan and then you don't tell anyone about it, then it was a lot of hard work for probably not the result you're wanting. So make sure you share it. A couple of places to start. The Go With Grace website, if you haven't been there already, there's a lot of information in there about all sorts of things, like the different types of burial and what a cremation looks like. What's the process around cremation? What's an advanced care plan and how do I get started on one? What's the difference between a power of attorney and an enduring power of attorney? So there's loads and loads of information on the website. There's also lots of really cool resources, so books and poems and podcasts and planning tools, which you might find helpful. And a whole bunch of businesses and services across Aotearoa. So the services, if you're looking for a funeral director in Whangarei, as an example, that's a good place to go and see all of the different funeral directors so that you can start picking up the phone and going for a visit. And then we have our planning tool. So that looks a little bit like this. So we've got sections around about me, health, legal and finance, digital information, my body, my farewell. So quite similar to what we've just talked through today. Each of these opens up into a section of a range of different questions. You can start your plan and you can fill in 2 questions and then you can save it and you can go close it down and come back again next week and do 2 more questions. The About Me section is really deliberately written so that it captures all of the information that's needed for your death certificate, which sounds really grim, doesn't it? But I tell you what, because we change relationships and you know you need information on your death certificate, like the date of birth of your mother. Now, if you're in your second or third relationship and they never met your mother, and then they have to fill in your death certificate and they need to know your mum's birthday, it's not as simple as it always seems. So that section is really intentionally designed so that all of your key information for your death certificate is captured for your loved ones so that you've already done half of the paperwork for them. With this plan, we also have this option to share. So what that means is that when you're ready, you can share your plan. People can't edit it, they can't change it, but they can view it. So that means you choose the people that you trust to share your plan with. It might be your kids or just your favourite kid, your partner, your spouse, and also your lawyer, your accountant, your GP, because that means that when you die, everybody is on the same page and everybody has the same information. Yeah. So that's something, it's free. You're very welcome to jump on and have a play with one of them. Okay, so this is your homework. Schedule those 6 monthly GP visits. Remember, this is about making sure that your medical records are up to date and that you've got proven capacity. So if you go and cut, half of the kids out of the will, no one can argue that you weren't of sound mind. Create an advanced care plan. So this is really important if, for people who suffer from things like dementia and Alzheimer's. It means that you have really clear instructions on what is important to you if you suddenly end up in hospital or you can no longer speak or think for yourself. Visit your lawyer and review and update your will and make sure you've got those enduring powers of attorney in place. So remember, these are the people who you trust to make decisions for you when you can no longer make decisions for yourself. create a Go With Grace plan. That's easy. And then with that piece around aged care support, Eldernet is an amazing resource. So they have a registry of every single residential care facility, every retirement village in the whole of New Zealand, and they have all of the contact information. They have the volumes of the vacancies, so you can actually see if there's any beds or rooms or villas available in these places. So it's a really useful tool, and they have a huge knowledge hub as well, just to support people thinking about all of those questions or decisions they have towards end of life. I would also encourage you to get creative. So I know this is a really tough topic, and don't get me wrong, I've had plenty of dark days, but you know, what I know is important as well is to celebrate life. We're all still here. That's a beautiful thing. Let's find some joy in that. So there's so many really cool creative things you can do in this process. Sometimes it's just helpful. Some people really like doing things with their hands, or they like building or creating while they're processing all of these big questions. So yeah, you might like to create a memory box. You might like to scrapbook or sew legacy blankets for your whānau. You can also build and decorate your own caskets. And you can also do things like make your own shroud or make your own urn. And at the very least, tick a few things off your bucket list. Yep. So Go With Grace is helping to organise or lead Dying Matters Week, and we've got events all week, all sorts of different things, workshops to help you understand some of the cost around funerals and end of life. We have a woman who is actually coming to demonstrate shroud making. She does really beautiful work where she meets people on their whenua, on their land, and she finds some of the native plants and leaves, and then she uses that to dye the silk, and then that's what people then get wrapped in. She encourages people to make this, you know, not on your deathbed, but now. It's a really beautiful, creative process, and that beautiful piece of fabric can then sit, you know, in your living room or in, you know, as part of your home. It doesn't have to be something that happens right at the end. They even have really cool caskets now that double as bookcases. So they stand on their end. They have shelves. You can have your casket just in the corner of your living room. Why not? We've just started a Go With Grace podcast, which is terrifying and fun and all of the good things. So we're starting to interview some really cool people about these topics there. We've started to do things like create cards and calendars to help people connect with other people. With that, I would say, you know, if you know someone is grieving or someone has faced a loss, reach out. Don't hold back. People always need to know that we're there. So that's one way that we're helping people to do that. We also have regular newsletters through Go With Grace. So if you're wanting updates on some of the interesting things that we're finding around the place, like the fact that Christchurch now has a water crematorium, so you can go through a cremation process, but it's done in water. Overseas, there's really crazy things, not so crazy, like human composting, where it's now legal and being offered as an option in other countries, and I'm really excited to see some of those things coming into New Zealand. We're also starting to get into offering training and support for workplaces, for groups, just even to share this kind of information. So if that's something that you want to talk to us about, feel free. So for me, this is all about shaping your legacy. It's so that you have the peace of mind that everything is in order. It's so that your families or your loved ones aren't burdened with making all of these decisions that we've just gone through when you die. And it's to create that really positive legacy to keep your family connected. So more and more, what I'm seeing is that families are sometimes breaking apart and never getting back together on the back of somebody dying, because there are differences of opinion about what should have happened, what that person wanted, and especially what happens to all of their assets. So the one way that you can make sure that your family doesn't become that family is to write everything down and make sure everybody knows what's important to you and what you want to have happen when you die. That's me.